They called him James, but most just said the butcher. In Umuokwe village, where palm trees lined ochre paths and roosters cried before the second cock crow, James's stall was more than a meat table. It was a mystery dressed in flies and fortune. Every market day, his bench overflowed with meat, soft, red, glistening under the rising sun. Not just fresh, but unnaturally tender, as if it had never known the stiffness of death. And cheap, too cheap. When other butchers groaned about cow scarcity or fuel hikes, James reduced his price again. People shrugged. Who were they to question a blessing? The women lined up early with their woven baskets. Some said it was because his meat cooked faster. Others swore it tasted sweeter, soft like baby goat, but not beef. They would whisper while cutting onions. Children ran ahead singing, "Butcher James Don bring meat o. Meat way day melt for pot o." Yet something always felt off. Nobody ever saw a delivery. No truck. No cow tethered behind his stall. No blood trails on the ground like the others. He came alone, left alone, always the first to open and the last to pack. And then there was his smile, thin, distant. It never reached his eyes. He didn't chat much, didn't haggle, just stood behind his table in a faded brown wrapper and cream singlet, hands folded, watching. Some said the gods favored him. Others said he'd once been a vet. But even those closest to him couldn't say where he got his meat, because no one had ever seen James kill a cow. And somehow, that made his meat taste stranger, better, but also wrong. The murmurs started like smoke, faint, drifting, but impossible to ignore. Other butchers began to grumble louder. Not openly, no, just in the hushed corners of palm wine joints or behind pepper grinding stalls. Where's James getting all this cow meat from? Mornings after livestock disease wiped out half the herds, James's stall remained full. No shortage, no price hike, just the same soft meat wrapped in banana leaves and calm silence. Mama Emmanuel, whose stall sat 3 wooden tables down, was the first to find something strange. She'd bent to sweep behind her table one humid afternoon when her broom hit something hard. A bone. White. Clean. Smooth. But small. Too small for a cow. She picked it up, turned it over in her hand, frowning. It looked almost human, but she shook it off. "Maybe goat," she muttered. Yet her hands trembled as she dropped it behind the drum. Then came Daniel's voice. Just a child, but children don't know how to lie well. He told his mother in whispers that he'd seen Uncle James carrying a bag that moved the night before. A black sack slung over his back. Something inside had kicked. Or twitched. He wasn't sure. He just remembered the way James turned when he noticed him watching, how his eyes didn't blink, how his lips didn't move. Still, nobody wanted to say it out loud. Not in a village like Umuokwe, where the gods punished false accusations and silence was often safer than truth. So they called it a blessing, a gift from the ancestors. And they kept buying, because as long as the meat stayed soft, no one really wanted to know where it came from. It was a Sunday morning when Grace vanished. 10 years old. Bright eyes, quick feet. She had gone to fetch water with her small yellow keg, like she'd done 100 times before. The well wasn't far, just a short walk past the market square, past the cluster of mango trees, and past James's quiet little stall that always smelled faintly of smoke and blood. She never made it home. A BY evening. The sun dipped low behind the hills, and panic rippled through the village like fire through dry thatch. Her mother's cries pierced the air. "Grace! Grace!" Neighbors poured out with lanterns and torches. They searched the bush paths. They checked the stream. Some even wandered toward the forest, calling her name into shadows. But the village slept that night with unease and open doors. One suspected James. Not yet. He was just the butcher, just the man who sold good meat. But the next morning, something changed. James's table looked heavier than usual. The meat, redder, glossier, almost wet. Too fresh. And there was so much of it. Long cuts, rounded slabs, delicate strips arranged like offerings. People noticed, but didn't speak. Not until they saw the new prices, half of what they were. Just 2 days before. "Is he mad?" someone muttered. "Even bone meat day cheap now." Still they bought. Because hunger is louder than suspicion. Grace's mother arrived around midday. Her wrapper was loose around her chest, her eyes swollen, and her voice already broken from the night before. She stopped at James's stall, looked at the meat, then looked at him. "Have you seen my daughter?" James didn't answer. He just wiped his hands with a damp cloth and looked past her. Her scream tore through the market. Raw, long, a sound that made even flies pause. And still, James said nothing. He just stood there, watching, silent, and behind him, hanging from a butcher's hook, something small dangled from a twine. Something the exact yellow shade as Grace's missing water keg. Daniel had always been the quiet one, sharp-eyed, always listening more than speaking. But after Grace vanished, something shifted in him. He didn't say it, but he watched James more. Every market day, he sat near the palm tree with roasted groundnuts and watched the butcher arrange his meat. Watched how James's eyes scanned the crowd but never lingered too long. Watched how his hands worked like machines, cutting flesh, like he'd done it in another life. Then one night, Daniel followed him. The moon was half covered in clouds, and the village was already drifting to sleep. Daniel crept barefoot behind James, keeping distance, heart slamming in his chest like a goat trapped in a drum. The path was quiet. Bushes rustled, frogs croaked, but James walked calmly, dragging a long black sack. The sack dripped, not fast, but steady. Thick drops that darkened the earth. Daniel almost turned back, but something pushed him forward. He slipped into the tall elephant grass when James stopped behind the cassava field. There, half covered by weeds and old roofing sheets, was a small hut, hidden, crude. No one ever mentioned it. Daniel crouched, barely breathing, as James unlatched the rusted door and pulled the sack inside. What happened next, Daniel would never describe. Not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. His eyes widened. His lips trembled. Tears poured, fast and hot, down his cheeks. He covered his mouth and ran. Tripped. Fell. Ran harder. By the time he got home, his mother rushed to him. What happened? He opened his mouth, but no words came. And for weeks after, Daniel wouldn't speak. Wouldn't walk near the market. Wouldn't even say James's name. But every time the butcher passed their compound, Daniel turned his face away and began to cry. The rain came heavy that night, pounding roofs, flooding narrow paths, loosening the stubborn soil around the cassava field. By morning, the air smelled of wet earth and broken secrets. The children were the first to find it. 3 of them, chasing each other barefoot, their laughter cutting through the mist. Then one tripped, face first into the mud. When he pushed himself up, his hand brushed something cold, something white, something shaped like a hand, but too small, too smooth. The other children gathered, their game forgotten. They dug with sticks, then bare hands. A skull, tiny ribs, a single braided bead tangled in what looked like hair. By noon, half the village had gathered, umbrellas and wrappers shielding their heads from the drizzle. The air was thick, not just with damp, but with dread. Chief Uche arrived, his red cap soaked. He bent low, inspected the bones, then stood. His voice was calm, too calm. "Let us not accuse without proof," he said. "Many things live and die in the bush." But his eyes didn't meet anyone's, especially not James's. Someone whispered, "Grace." Another hissed, "He used to work at the abattoir, ABI." And just like that, the hush broke. Whispers cracked into murmurs. Someone mentioned a cleansing ritual. Another spoke of digging deeper, purifying the soil, calling the priest. James stood beneath a nearby mango tree, arms folded, brown wrapper wet to his ankles. His face gave nothing, no fear, no defense. Just eyes, dark and unreadable, fixed on the crowd. That he didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, and somehow, that silence felt louder than any denial, as if he already knew what they'd found. As if he'd counted on the rain. She came on a Tuesday, wearing dust on her slippers and heat on her face. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, voice like dry harmattan wind. She introduced herself as Ada from Umuokwe village, but her gaze locked straight on James the moment she reached the market square. "You," she said aloud, pointing. "You're not James. You're Nnamdi." A hush settled over the nearby stalls. James didn't flinch, just kept folding meat into banana leaves, slowly to at first. The villagers laughed it off. "Another mad woman," someone whispered. But Ada's tone cut through their doubt. "He was chased from our town," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "He sold meat just like this. Cheap, soft, always plenty. Then dogs started disappearing. Then 2 children went missing. The laughter faded. They found his smokehouse deep in the forest. Bones, burned cloth, teeth wrapped in leaves. He ran before they could catch him. A cold wind passed, though the air was still. People looked at each other, then at James. No one spoke, but everything shifted. The way they stood, the way they chewed, the way they stopped calling him Butcher James and just muttered, him. Still, no one dared confront him. Not yet, but every eye followed him now. From the stall to the stream, from the shrine path to his compound, and that name, Nnamdi, it clung to him like a shadow finally returning to its body. Elder Jude had seen many things in his 60-odd years. Dead goats struck by lightning, twins born with teeth, even a masquerade that wept during festival season. But something about James had never sat well with him. And after Ada's warning, and the bones found near the cassava field, Jude decided he couldn't keep folding his arms like the rest. One humid night, while crickets sang like prophets and the moon played hide and seek behind drifting clouds, Jude crept toward James's stall. Torch in hand, feet light as breath, he slid under the rickety back fence. The stall looked normal, almost too normal. The butcher's table was wiped clean. No scent, no blood, just silence. Then he found the freezer. A battered metal box tucked behind old crates, humming softly. He lifted the lid. Rows of meat, neatly wrapped in banana leaves, tied with twine, organized by size. Perfect. Too perfect. He began lifting bundles. Most were heavy slabs, cow, goat maybe. Then he reached one that felt different. Not heavy enough. Too long. Too thin. His fingers trembled as he untied the knot. He peeled the banana leaf slowly, until a gasp. A stumble. Then the torch clattered to the ground. And Elder Jude screamed. A scream not just of horror, but of recognition. Something inside that bundle should not have been there. Could not have. Be why morning. His compound was empty, his slippers at the doorstep, his door wide open, and not a single soul saw him leave. The New Yam Festival arrived with drums, laughter, and the scent of roasted maize thick in the air. Women tied their wrappers tighter, men clapped hands in rhythm, and children smeared with chalk danced in circles near the village square. And then James, quiet, brooding James, did the unexpected. He donated meat, free, generous helpings, soft, juicy cuts, wrapped in plantain leaves. For the ancestors, he said, smiling, an actual smile, wide and toothy. People blinked. Then they ate, eagerly, with greasy fingers and careless joy. Mama Emmanuel blessed him out loud. The gods have truly favored this man, she cried, her mouth full. Even Chief Uche clapped him on the back. You've outdone yourself, James. Everyone chewed and laughed and danced, except Ada. She stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, eyes locked on the pile of meat like it might leap up and confess. Her wrapper sagged slightly at the waist, and her hands trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper. Fear, certainty. That night, as the last flute faded and the village snored under a drunken moon, Ada returned. She moved like a ghost, quiet, urgent, slipping behind James's stall with only a small lantern and a rusted hoe. She dug. The earth was soft, recently turned. Her breath grew shallow as she scraped deeper. Then, metal clinked. She reached and got a necklace, small, handmade, beads missing. The last time she saw it was around Grace's neck. Half of it was gnawed, the threads frayed with bite marks. Ada gasped. Her fingers froze. Behind her, the crickets stopped. A shadow stretched over the soil. Long, still, blocking the moonlight. She didn't turn. She didn't scream. She just closed her eyes, and the screen cuts to black. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when part 2 drops. You won't want to miss what happens next.